Welcome to Workstyle Stories, because life changes and every life is different. This week I'm joined by Charlotte. Hello, Charlotte.
Hey, Alex.
And this week we are going to be talking about reframing our definitions of success, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the kind of generational shift of mindset that's happening at the moment. But before we get into all that, Charlotte, would you mind just telling us who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Yes, of course. So I'm Charlotte, as you said, or actually in German it's Charlotte, and that's where I am at the moment. I'm from Hamburg, and currently I'm about an hour north of it, in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, and I'm a virtual assistant.
So, Charlotte, you are a virtual assistant at the moment, working in rural Germany, but presumably you weren't always that. What was your kind of work life like before you made that transition? What type of work were you doing, and how was it?
Yeah, so I studied in Germany, and then immediately afterwards I moved to London, and I was working in the music industry for 8 years there. Which was kind of awesome in the beginning. It was always my dream to move to London, and music was kind of what I wanted to do. So it was actually amazing that I made that come true. Yeah. Had a great time for many, many years. But then the last few years, I think I fell out of love with it a little bit. And I was starting to question whether this is really it, and whether I really want to continue doing this for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Yeah. And then I eventually quit my job now 3 years ago to go traveling just for a few months. And that ended up being about 2 years. And traveling was then what kind of led me to become a freelancer and start my VA business, because I just had to find a way to keep this travel thing going, because it was making me so happy.
All right. So I think escaping the kind of London life or the urban life is something that we've heard before on Workstyle Stories, that it when you live and work in a city like that, it can become to define you and define your kind of your way of life, and in a way control a lot of your decision making when you're in that environment, can't it? Something must have happened for you to go, right, enough's enough, I'm gonna quit my job and go traveling. Did it, or was it just a kind of an erosion of your love for your work?
I think it was slowly kind of adding up, and I started to notice more and more that I was just kind of living for the weekends or living for the next holiday, and just waiting for time to pass. It's quite sad when you're you know, in my mid-30s now. I shouldn't really wait for time to pass. I should be making the most of it. And also I couldn't travel a lot because I was never even allowed to take more than 2 weeks at a time off. And then basically what made me take that decision to go travel was a job offer I had. And I always had this idea that if I moved to back to Germany, I'll take some time off and go travel in between. That job didn't happen, but this idea kind of stuck. And that's what made me do this trip. And as soon as I kind of left London, I almost felt this weight lifted off my shoulders, and I realized I was so much happier, and I had to keep extending this trip.
So you were happier when you were traveling?
Yeah.
Can you just describe that? Like, what was the difference of feeling? What did you observe in yourself, whether that's mentally or physically? What were the differences?
It was interesting, actually, because I think I had just accepted for myself that I'm perhaps quite a negative or mellow person. I thought that's kind of almost just the way I am. And almost as soon as I started, it took less than 2 weeks of traveling, but I was suddenly waking up excited for the day. And like, I don't know, like I said, it was like this weight lifted off my shoulders, and suddenly I was really enjoying life so much. And I realized that what I thought just wasn't even me. I just thought I'm not a very happy person, but actually I was. And interestingly, it had quite a physical effect as well, because I never used to be sick very often at all. And in the last few years in London, especially in winter, I was kind of just going from one cold to the next, and like had several each year. And then as soon as I started traveling, on my second or third day, I came down with the flu. And that was it for 2 years. I never had anything again, which was fascinating for me because I thought I had turned into this quite poorly person.
So you carried on doing that for a couple of years. Were you working while you were doing that, or were you just taking the opportunity to enjoy traveling?
I was doing a little bit of everything. So I did briefly work as a tour guide and as a waitress. I even made some soaps at one point. But mainly I was doing workaway. So I was working in return for the accommodation and food. And I was also doing a lot of couch surfing and hitchhiking to save money.
Yeah. Okay. So how did that go down with your kind of friends and family? What were their perceptions of that?
Mixed, I'd say. So some were really supportive. I think what really helped me were some friends who actually said, I don't know the last time your voice sounded like this, and you sounded this excited and happy talking about something. So a lot of people were saying, look, you're the happiest you've been in a long time. Clearly you're doing the right thing. You have to keep doing this. But there were also kind of a lot of naysayers. My parents weren't overly supportive, especially my dad. He's 80 years old. He's a totally different generation. He's had his one job all his life, and also it is just a different generation. But there were quite a lot of arguments and accusations of, being irresponsible and, now you had your fun, isn't it time to come back and, be a responsible adult now? You got to think about the future, things like that. And even friends my age, some of them were saying, come on, most people, if they even take some time off, they take a few months or they take a year or so to do a sabbatical. You've taken 2 years. That's more than most people do. Surely you have to come back now and do what everybody else is doing, essentially.
Very hard to fight against those norms and the norms that other people put upon us based on their own experiences and the way that life is and society's constructs. And that requires for us to have our own interpretation of success, of what we're aiming for, and a pursuit of different goals. So, for example, pursuing personal happiness and fulfillment over material wealth and possession. So what's it like for you now? What's your work style like? What does success look like? And how are you feeling about it?
Yeah. So it's kind of because of exactly what you were describing, because it's quite hard to almost break free from this. And also, I love what you guys are doing, because when I started almost knowing that I needed to do this, but I didn't know anybody else that was doing this thing that I had in mind. And especially among my German friends, they're relatively traditional, kind of settling down, marrying, having kids, building a house and all. And I was almost the odd one out. So it's difficult when you don't know somebody that's doing anything like it. So discovering people like you was a huge help. Or communities like this one. But basically now, because of the current situation and the pandemic, in Germany, I wanted to be closer to my family, just in case something happens. But I'm choosing my clients. I'm choosing when I work. I'm not a morning person, for example, so I quite often kind of work after dark because that really suits me. It means that when the sun is shining, like right now, I love to go outside and go out with the dogs or go horse riding or something. And then work in the evenings, for example. But my goal is, whenever it's kind of reasonably safe to go traveling again, to go back to that. My first stop will be Mexico. And the way I kind of picture it at the moment is that I'll probably work about maybe 2 to 3 hours a day, or I might do kind of 2.5, 3 days full time a week. And then just actually be in the place and make the most of being in that place. So for me, that means meeting the locals, probably doing some volunteering in the places I go, and scuba diving, which is kind of my big thing.
Good for you, Charlotte. Thank you so much for sharing your work style story with us. We've run out of time now, but it's been great to meet you. We've been Workstyle Stories. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time. Bye-bye for now.